Hey, it's me again, Cecilia. What do you mean it's been months? Who said anything it's been months? I didn't say that it's been months, but apparently it's been months, no matter. I want to say happy Valentine's Day, but I'm not sure when this video will actually be out, so just know that in theory, this was meant to be out by then, or at least around then. So if it's not out by then, well then, late Valentine's Day. Happy late Valentine's Day. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's just jump right into what we're doing today. Here's the sketch I shall be line arting and coloring today. I unfortunately don't have footage of the sketching process, because I didn't think I was going to make a Speedpaint video of this. I didn't even think I was going to share the drawing to start with, but I'm impatient and I'm a sappy person who likes wedding aesthetics, so here we go. So while the line art is going on, line art that, mind you, became way more detailed than it probably needed to be. I mean, with the sheer size of the drawing, clearly none of the nuances in the line art would be visible at full size, but I did them anyways because I don't know. So anyways, while that is on screen, I'm gonna try to walk you through the design process. Since I like wedding looks so much, her dress is pretty self-indulgent. I went with what I personally like, but also just what I think the character would want to wear. I often draw her with off-shoulder dresses, and while that may be redundant a bit, I just genuinely think it looks good on her. At first I was going to go for a more bohemian style of wedding dress, if that makes any sense. A dress with less structure that just sort of flows off her body with lacy details and maybe a flower crown. But then I found all these beautiful wedding dresses with the lace cleavage, not certain of the terminology here, and I just instantly fell in love with the references. I find that often in fiction there's always the one type of wedding dress with the long veil and all, but in reality there are so many different choices, so I wanted to make sure her dress is unique a bit. In the end, after trying out a few thumbnails of dress styles, I found that the one that fit her the best was this more traditional shaped dress. It gives her a nice silhouette and, well, I also have to admit that that's the type of dress that I prefer on a personal level. You don't get married every day, right? So might as well feel like a princess when you do it, no? At least that's the way I see it. I decided a sort of waist-length lacy veil would fit the best for her. With all the research I've done, I've realized just how many different choices there are. Like, apparently even the tone of white can be different, even though who will actually notice that? I don't know about veil etiquette and what things should go together in what way, but I thought that this sort of rounded edge lacy veil would give off the feeling I wanted to create, which was softness and, I don't know, a more mature but elegant and familial feeling. Even though this isn't canon yet, I can only picture the character's wedding as a sort of confirmation of how close they are and how it's a more, quote, official family they've become, even though marriage is definitely not a requirement for that. Because, and this is just my opinion here, if you decide to get married to someone for real, that must certainly mean something deep down. Like, you care enough for that person to promise to be with them for however long you can. It may be a naive thought or an archaic one of me. I don't know. It's a pretty significant moment, I think, so I definitely wanted to project a special aura from her dress and her expression. Of course, getting married in life isn't a necessity at all, but to me it does sound like a very special moment, and for the sake of the piece I immersed myself in that feeling. Either way, the flowers in her bouquet were also largely based on personal preference. I'm sure an actual florist would come here and tell me a thing or two about my composition, but the two flowers I definitely wanted to have in the bouquet were forget-me-nots and wisterias. Not certain if either one of those flowers are put in bouquets, but I found a few references, so I'm leaning towards yes, but who knows? The forget-me-nots are meant as a sort of representation of Axel, who's, I guess her partner in this case, and his affection. Oh, by the way, I'm definitely cherry picking the flower meanings, so I apologize if I'm incorrect. I only know what I find online, so I'm sure I must be off. But here is, according to flowermeaning.com, the few meanings of forget-me-nots that I thought were the most fitting in this case. I quote, "True and undying love, a connection that lasts through time, fidelity and loyalty in a relationship despite separation or other challenges, reminders of your favorite memories or time together with another person, and growing affection between two people." As for the wisteria, it's meant to symbolize May herself. According to the same website, flowermeaning.com, wisterias may mean, quote, "good luck, especially for the start of a business or new marriage." Business doesn't really apply here, but bear with me. "Welcoming someone to a new town or home, expressing your affections after meeting someone special for the first time, serious devotion, whether it's to a cause or another person." If all of that is incorrect, well, they are pretty flowers. The roses and all the other flowers are there just to make it a bouquet and to round it all up. After all, wisterias hang and forget-me-nots are quite tiny flowers, so it wouldn't look like a well-organized bouquet if only those two flowers are present, I think. For the flat colors, I used my saved color palette for all the usual elements like the skin, hair, and eye colors. When it came to the dress itself, obviously the most common color for wedding gowns is white, but I wanted to have just a little difference from the white background, so I used a very light gray blue that I adjusted a bit later to make sure that it's just a little bit darker than absolute white. With all the shading over it, you won't be able to see that it's not totally white, which is exactly the intent. Working with perfectly white things is more difficult for me, and I usually reserve the color for the white of the eyes, for example. I briefly thought about making a thick outline for the piece. I wasted a couple of minutes trying to get it right, but it looked awkward, so I completely abandoned it in the end. I knew that I was going to paint a sunny, bright piece and that I'll do all the nuances with the shading, so I kept all the colors pretty pale and somewhat saturated. I know that many artists use a grayscale to check all the values of the colors to see if they harmonize between each other. I don't do it because, I don't have a good reason, so yeah. I mostly just forget to even think about it, honestly. Maybe I should make a bigger effort with my technique. When you use that, it's easier to see whether the values of your foreground is the correct darkness as opposed to the background and all the elements in it. Since this drawing doesn't have elements in the foreground, it's not as big a deal, I think, but it can be a useful thing to do when you do more complex drawings. Not that this piece doesn't have a lot of elements and details, but it doesn't have a complex background and 300 million elements to take in consideration. The flowers took a while to color and polish because they have quite a lot of parts. You might have noticed that they were made using Clip Studio paint brushes. I'm not super good at drawing flowers, and using the tool made it more efficient for me. I'm a firm believer that you should be able to use the maximum amount of help and tools at your disposal, of course as long as it's not plain plagiarism. I later took out the lilies from the bouquet because I didn't think they fit in color-wise. I tried to color all the flowers like their natural counterparts, but none of the colors of lilies seemed fitting. I wanted the bouquet to be more in the realm of white flowers with pink, blue, and purple accent colors, and the yellow inside of the lilies looked kind of awkward in all of that. Plus, composition-wise, they just felt slapped on, not as a genuine part of the bouquet. Because the flowers are, of course, brushes, one of the challenges working with them was to get them in just the right angle to feel natural. In real life, the flowers are of course attached by the stem or stabbed into the sponge handle thingy, so they need to look like they all come from the same center. I'm still on the fence about the coherence of the flowers, but I doubt I could have made it all that much better if I spent more time on it than I already did. At the end, I added some greenery in the background to round it all out. The flowers alone didn't seem enough, and many sort of teardrop bouquets have a round top. Oh, I almost forgot. Here's another note about the design. I didn't want the dress and the bouquet to compete. Like, I needed to find the correct ratio between the complexity of the dress, the complexity of her accessories, and the complexity of the bouquet, which I believe is also an issue in real life. The bouquet needs to fit with the dress to complement it, but so do all the accessories. None of them should outshine the other. After all, you're not a walking Christmas tree. I had to keep in mind all of that while designing her look. After all, I doubt having a bouquet or dress that screams louder than the actual bride is the ideal. It's her wedding, so all the elements really just need to complement her. When it came down to the shading, I had a very clear goal in mind. I wanted a sort of effect as if the sun was shining at her through the leaves of a tree, like as if she's standing half in the shade. So I had a couple of glow layers to do just that, and tried to gently color in spots with yellows and oranges and pinks, kind of like it would be under a tree. For most elements I shaded, I mixed in some magentas, purples, and blues to nuance and enhance the colors. The flats were simple, so I wanted to wow with the finesse of the shading. You may notice at this point the sheer amount of layers I use. It's mostly out of paranoia. What if I don't like it anymore? What if I want to change the hue later on for only this part? It makes the file heavier, but easier to edit down the road. So while I admire one layer people, I'm just here like, but what if you change your mind later? Give yourself the chance to edit your stuff. I used a nice smooth blending brush that I found on the Clip Studio Paint asset store. I really like this brush. It's not too soft and it blends well. I think it's called something like soft paint. I think about probably 98% of the shading on this piece was done using only that brush. I hate to admit, but I've collected so many different brushes, but I always just end up using the same 3 or 4 ones. Whoops. One of the color blends I'm the most proud of on this piece has to be May's hair. I just love all the purple and pink shading I did with the blue backlight. It contrasts nicely with her red hair, and with all the highlights too, her hair just looks so smooth and shiny. For the backdrop, I went simple. A slow gradient encased in this sort of watercolor blotches. It gives the piece an organic framing, just enough so she doesn't seem to be floating in space too much. The focus is on her, not on the background, so I had no intention of making a full background. If I were to try and puzzle piece one at this point into the piece, it would probably have looked flat and awkward. Plus, it was just simply not the point here, so yeah. Most of the background is just the one single bush and a couple of clouds off in the distance. For me, a lot of the complex shading is just layers upon layers of gradually darker colors, though I think that's the case for most artists anyway. I also usually use a lot of lighting effects on my drawings, which is just as big a plus as an inconvenience, because if you layer too many effects on top of a drawing, you can lose a lot of the original charm of the piece. I often find that, without any effects, my drawings are sort of flat, so I have a tendency to overdo it. But this piece is the first one in a long time where I think I only used a reasonable amount of light effects. The only really noticeable effect up close is the chromatic aberration I added at the end. It adds a little bit more subtle coloration to the piece, and I frankly just like the way it looks. Not all decisions in making art needs to make any logical sense, I think. It's why I'm reticent in making proper tutorials, because there are a lot of decisions I make on the fly. Because I just think it looks nice for no apparent logical reason, so tutorials kinda need to explain why they're good, but I have trouble explaining why I think what I do is good, because it's just simply a question of preference. So, here is the finished piece. I think I say this every video, but I'm so proud of the result. Every video I make, I see the improvement in my technique and the finesse of the pieces, and this one really just hits that special spot in my heart. I'm especially proud of the small details you only notice up close, like how I shaded her hair or the subtle line breaks in the line art. And honestly, just her face in general. I really wanted her to have that "God, I love this man" face. It's her wedding, so I'd imagine she'd be overjoyed. Heck, I'd be overjoyed probably, so here it is. There is a pair to this piece of XL in a nice suit. I've got no good footage of me making it, but yeah. I love his suit, and I proclaim colored suit supremacy. Not all suits need to have boring colors. Anyhow, you can check out the high-resolution finished drawings of this video on my Patreon. Thank you very much to all of my patrons, including Alberto Jimenez, Robert, Negromaki, Britt, Kelly Ganning, Sonny Olivas, Beth Linkert, Connor Browning, Friendly Neighborhood School Counselor, Thaddeus Linville, Kat, Snoopy Doge, and Morgan Greenwood. Like and subscribe for more art-related videos, and visit my Instagram at made_by_Cecilia or Twitter with the same handle. We've also got a Discord server where we hang out and chat. All links are in the description below. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time!